You step through your front door, the latch clicks shut, and suddenly your shoulders drop 3 inches like you just put down a weight you forgot you were carrying. No one yelled at you. No one slighted you. You just spent time in the company of others. And now it feels like you survived an endurance test. If that lands anywhere near home, hear this. You are not defective. You are not clinically depressed, and you are certainly not a misanthrope. But something unusual is happening inside your head, something the social butterflies will never glimpse. Because those of us who genuinely crave solitude possess a unique psychological fingerprint that research is finally beginning to map. And a few of these discoveries might completely reframe how you see your own nature. Here is the false story you absorbed by osmosis. Popularity equals health. The person with the most weekend plans wins the game of life. And if you'd rather read alone on Friday night, you're overdue for a repair. Schools applaud the extroverts. Promotions go to the networkers. Dating culture punishes anyone who doesn't reply instantly. So eventually, you started believing the whisper, they're right about you. Psychology disagrees, completely. And the evidence is lopsided. So before we unpack the 5 traits, erase every should society painted onto your mirror. Let's start with what actually happens inside a mind that likes quiet. Your silence is not an absence. It's an instrument. Trait 1. Your brain treats stillness as a resource, not a threat. Back in 2014, psychologist Timothy Wilson at UVA ran a now famous experiment. He left participants alone in a bare room for 15 minutes. No phone, no book, just thoughts. The only alternative was a button that delivered a mild electric shock to themselves. 67% of men and 25% of women chose to zap themselves. Actual physical pain was preferable to being unplugged with their own mind for a quarter of an hour. Now reflect on you. You sit in silence, and your brain settles like a cat finding sunlight. It drifts. It digs up old memories, half-formed questions, ideas that only surface when the world stops feeding you noise. Psychologists label this elevated internal awareness. Your default mode network doesn't panic without input. You don't need background chatter to feel okay. And that one distinction already separates you from the majority of adults who have never spent 10 quiet minutes with themselves without reaching for a distraction. But that's just the surface. The next one hits closer to home. Trait 2. Your social battery isn't low. It's high drain because you listen differently. People assume you're exhausted because you lack social skills. Wrong. You're exhausted because you run social software at 10 times the resolution. When someone speaks to you, you actually hear them. You see the flicker across their brow. You notice what they didn't say. That takes massive cognitive fuel. The person next to you at the party is scanning headlines. You're reading the full novel, footnotes included. Neuroscience research from figures like Hansen suggests that individuals drawn to solitude often have a naturally higher baseline of internal activation. Social input doesn't refresh them. It overwhelms them. Think of it as internet bandwidth. You don't have a weaker signal. You're running 30 browser tabs, 3 of them playing video, while everyone else has 2 tabs open. Of course, your system heats up faster. So your small circle isn't a weakness. It's intelligent energy management. And that flows directly into something even more revealing. Trait 3. You don't just hear people. You feel the room before anyone speaks. Tell me if this rings true. You walk into a coffee shop or a meeting, and within seconds, before a single word, you already know who is tense, whose smile is fake, which 2 co-workers are silently fighting. You absorb the emotional weather without trying. That ability is called emotional perceptiveness. Psychologist Elena Ron estimated that roughly 15 to 20% of the population carries this trait at a heightened level. Your nervous system is tuned to a frequency that picks up signals others completely miss. You enter a space, and it's like everyone is broadcasting on a secret channel only you can hear. Sounds like a superpower, right? It's not. not without a mute button. Because when you feel everything at full volume all day, the only way to hear your own voice again is to step outside. Solitude isn't your escape from people. It's your return to yourself after being flooded by everyone else's signal. What many spend years in therapy learning, how to build an emotional boundary, your brain started constructing when you were young. You aren't running from connection. You're filtering the noise. But here's the paradox that quiet people rarely recognize about themselves. Trait 4. Your mind generates breakthroughs differently than the crowd. You know that feeling in the shower or on a long walk when one random thought hooks into another, then another, and suddenly you've built something entirely new in your head? That cascade is not universal. Researcher Gregory Feist at San Jose State analyzed decades of data on creative personalities across art and science. The single strongest predictor of original work wasn't IQ or raw talent. It was a pronounced preference for working alone. Why? Because the brain needs the absence of external chatter to forge the unexpected connections that produce novel ideas. Nikola Tesla refused group work and said his best concepts arrived during solitary strolls. Franz Kafka wrote deep at night when the world slept. Those weren't eccentric habits. That was the engine itself. So every hour you spend alone is not wasted time. It's your cognition performing the exact work it was designed for. And the people urging you to get out more have no idea what they're asking you to turn off. But now we pause. Because an uncomfortable question needs air. Everything above is true, but only if you're honest about the why behind your solitude. Do you choose alone time because it refuels you, or because connection feels threatening? Because no one can reject you if you're not there? One is a genuine preference. The other is a shield. And from the outside, they look identical. If your quiet time tastes like freedom, keep going. If it tastes like hiding, that might be worth a conversation with someone you trust. Because the 5th trait only lands if the foundation is solid. Trait 5. You don't collect people. You curate them. You've sat at a table where everyone is talking and no one is saying anything real, and you feel yourself mentally leave the building. Not because you're rude, but because your brain ran a silent cost-benefit analysis and decided, this interaction is draining me faster than it's feeding me. Your mind treats shallow chatter the way your stomach treats expired gas station sushi. Technically edible, but your system knows the difference. And after enough empty exchanges, it refuses to pretend anymore. That's why your inner circle is small. That's why you'd rather have one genuine conversation than 20 polite ones. And the people who passed through your filter, they know they were chosen, not just tolerated. Now zoom out. A brain that doesn't fear stillness. An emotional radar that reads entire rooms before a word is spoken. A creative engine that only fires when the noise drops out. An energy system that refuses to waste itself on performance. And a filter that only lets through what is real. That's not a collection of oddities. That is an entirely different operating system for being human. And the real tragedy is that most people holding all of these traits spend years believing they are the problem. Too sensitive, too quiet, too picky. Because no one ever told them that their wiring isn't a defect. It's the whole design. The world will keep celebrating the loudest voice in the room. People will keep asking why you're so quiet, as if quietness were a riddle needing an answer. But somewhere beneath all that noise, you already know something they don't. You know what your own mind sounds like when no one else is there. If this hit home, drop a like for Psychology Insights, and here's your quiet invitation to subscribe.